Hello everybody and welcome back to the Polygon Count podcast. My name is Ross, his name is James, and we are here to talk about video games. Now James, we have got a lot to run down today. We are going to be talking about the PS5 showcase that was revealed a couple of days ago. First and foremost, I have to ask you, A, how are you? And B, did you manage to secure your PlayStation pre-order?
I mean, I'm doing fine as well as can be without getting a PlayStation pre-order. Because no, I did not manage after they just sprung it on us like at the minute it happened.
I can't believe that you weren't ready at 3 minutes past 11 for Game in Basingstoke to release their pre-orders.
I know, it'll haunt me for the rest of my life of going, why did I have to quickly eat a snack at that precise moment when there were greater things to be done? But you know, maybe they'll release more on release like they claim to be, or maybe they'll just do a similar thing and go, we've got more and we're announcing them now, and now they're sold out again. So sorry, we tried.
What an absolute shit show. At the time of recording, I should stress, at the time of recording, tomorrow is the Xbox launch day. So we'll have to compare notes when we next sit down to convene for a podcast on how these pre-releases and these pre-orders went. But yeah, we'll get into things in just a minute with the PS5 pre-order. But what an absolute fucking shit show that has been. So let's crack into this. We've got a lot to talk about, and frankly, we would be remiss to be recording a podcast today of all days and not mention the massive news that broke start of the afternoon. I can't remember exactly when it happened now. Either way, Microsoft today completed the purchase of game studio Bethesda for $7.5 billion. The purchase has thrown into question the exclusivity rights to beloved Bethesda franchises such as The Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Wolfenstein, and Doom. So, like I say, we've got a lot to run through with the PS5 showcase, but James, initial reaction to this, what do you think it may mean now for the exclusivity rights to some of those games and others that are all Bethesda property?
It was bloody crazy. I didn't obviously see it happen. Like, there's original rumors saying that Microsoft were going to purchase Warner Bros, but then this Bethesda deal, their parent company, came from nowhere. And you know, I'm not Bethesda's biggest fan. I mean, they make very good games, but they're just not my cup of tea. But I mean, it's obviously showing a lot more power for Microsoft. That's one of their biggest concerns have been, we don't have as much exclusive games like Sony do. So it's clearly a reaction to that, but then I don't know if they're going to actually make all of these games exclusive. Like, I find it hard to believe that Elder Scrolls or Fallout will be made, or even Doom will be made exclusive to the Xbox, just because, I mean, the one of the team from Bethesda even said that, you know, we're going to support, we don't care what you play on, where you are, where you know, how you can play or whatever. We're going to supply our games to you. And that came out at the same time as they said that, you know, we've just been bought by Microsoft. So it kind of suggests that they're going to keep some agnostic games. You know, there might be some future games that are made by the teams that have been purchased, which will be exclusive. But I don't know. I just find it hard to believe that they would make it exclusive for yes, I could be wrong, absolutely. I mean, they've got it within their rights to make them exclusive, but I just find it implausible. And I suppose Microsoft have been trying to get their games on all platforms anyway, and the fact that they've now got a major studio which will sell games on the other platforms makes you think they're just going to keep at it and just get the revenue from putting their games on PlayStation.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm very split on this news and what it might mean for exclusivity rights, because as you say, the big criticism of Xbox this generation in particular has been the absolute dearth of interesting exclusives to the Xbox and to Microsoft's franchise. So on the one hand, if you're going to spend this kind of money, 7.5 billion is an enormous amount of money, especially in this economy right now, to spend on anything, let alone a game studio. So for me, I think if you're spending that kind of money, which I think, if I'm right in saying, was about $1 billion less than Disney paid for Marvel and Lucasfilms combined, if you're spending that kind of money on a game studio, I would have thought there would be a certain level of obligation for series like Fallout, for instance, to become Xbox exclusives going forward. I would imagine something like Wolfenstein will be, if it continues into a new set of games. But yeah, I mean, games like Doom, which obviously has its origins in the PlayStation as well. The original Doom was released on the PlayStation. I can see that. I can see that still crossing over, and it's of course worth mentioning that Bethesda are already developing 2 games that are going to be PlayStation exclusives, including one that we'll be talking about in a little while, that was revealed in the showcase, and it's already been announced that those 2 will remain PlayStation exclusives. So it's clear that Microsoft is going to take a bit of a bit more of a case-by-case approach to these titles. But I'd be staggered personally if, for instance, the next Fallout is across certainly at least PlayStation. I can see it being retained on. I can see certain games being retained on Switch and PC because Microsoft like to be able to shift their market into those kinds of consoles and those kinds of outlets. But I'd be surprised to see something like Fallout, for instance, or the next Doom game appear on PlayStation. For me, I just don't think you spend that money without guaranteeing that at least one of those major franchises will be an exclusive.
Yeah, well, I mean, this could be similar to what they're going to do with Final Fantasy 16, another game that we're going to talk about in a bit. But obviously, Final Fantasy 15 was on all of the platforms, and there's been a Final Fantasy 13 as well was spread across the platforms. So they've got these like mainline Final Fantasy games spread across platforms, but now 16 is going to be exclusive to PlayStation, which makes you think maybe Microsoft will do a similar thing then. Maybe, okay, the next Fallout will be exclusive, but then maybe there'll be other Fallouts in the future which won't be. I mean, that could be a potential route that they go for their IP. I mean, obviously, again, as they actually own it, and PlayStation doesn't own Square Enix. Microsoft have more freedom to just go, actually, we're just going to make them all exclusive. I don't know. I personally think that it's just, I don't know, it would be a weird thing, especially as Microsoft want to try and have a shotgun approach to where their games go. And like obviously you've seen like Cuphead, which obviously is across everything, and Minecraft is now across everything now, and they've really got that idea. One of the funniest things I actually saw was on Twitter. I don't know if you saw it, but it was trending. People were saying, "Okay, Sony, now you go buy yes. go buy Konami, go buy Rockstar." And it's just like, what is this? Like, why? I mean, I'm not against Microsoft buying Bethesda, but I mean, I would be against if now like Microsoft and Sony just went out and purchased like all of the major game developers. It would just be a bit bad for the industry and having that like diversity.
I think if we're being completely honest as well, the era of the console wars has, if not ended, is certainly diminished. Sony have come out multiple times during the release cycle of the PS5 and say we don't really mind what Xbox are doing. And I think even as recently as this week they were discussing why they didn't do a reduced PS5 in the same vein as the Xbox Series S, and they said we have absolutely the utmost respect for our competitors and the way that they've approached this cycle. So I think from a fan perspective, maybe we stoke the flames of these potential brand rivalries between the Xbox and the PlayStation still. But I mean, just from an economic standpoint, I'd be staggered if the next Fallout isn't an exclusive, even if they do a Fallout spin-off that then becomes available across all platforms. I kind of feel like one at least of these major franchises has got to end up being exclusive to justify that kind of outlay. But maybe they've got an idea in mind that they want Bethesda to work on that they think can justify that price tag given Bethesda's weight, and that will be their exclusive. Who's to say? But certainly from this distance, it's a fascinating piece of news. I don't think anyone expected to see today. But the future of some of these franchises, especially if you are a dedicated Elder Scrolls fan, and now there's the potential that it could end up being an Xbox exclusive after you've played it on the PlayStation for the last X amount of years. It's certainly one of those that's going to cause a bit of concern among consumers for the time being. But equally, there's no guarantee just yet. I suppose we'll just have to wait and see what news breaks in the coming days. Hopefully by the time this podcast goes out, we'll have a bit more information and have a bit more guidance on where Microsoft sees Bethesda going in the future. But we should really focus on the PlayStation Showcase because there is a lot to cover, and we are hoping to keep this to an hour. No promises. So, first and foremost, the biggest news that came out of this showcase obviously was the price of the 2 PS5s. So in the UK, £450 for the disc drive version, £350 for the digital version. Initially, what are your thoughts on these prices? Matching the Xbox Series X with the disc version, and the digital version still being £100 more expensive than the Xbox Series S. So what are your initial reaction to these kinds of prices?
Well, it was kind of expected. I mean, there'd been loads of like price leaks, so we kind of already knew what the price was going to look like. I mean, it was only really a matter of like confirming the case. But I mean, I don't. It's obviously quite expensive of a console, but you think about what they do offer, and you kind of expect in this sort of price that it's not actually that much of an issue. I mean, I think the PS4 was running at a loss anyway. I think they're doing the same with the PS5. It's running at a loss. The idea for them is to make more money on selling the games or the accessories later on down the line. So, yeah, I mean, I think especially for the physical version of the console, I think that's to be expected. For the digital only, I would have expected more of a drop in price than 100. I mean, I know it's a lot more. It's got the same powers as the physical one. It just doesn't have the disc drive. But it's just that, I mean, amount of times you borrow a game from maybe a friend, or the amount of times that you just go to a pre-owned, if you go to like Game or somewhere and you just buy a pre-owned copy of the game, you're going to make back roughly that £100 pretty quickly in just using cheaper alternatives of games. I personally think that the Series S is a smarter price and standpoint. I mean, it's a little weaker than the Series X, but it's a lot cheaper. It's the cheapest. It's even cheaper than the Switch now. When that was launched, it's very cheap. And if you're going into like Christmas, with parents are more likely to spend £250 on a console for their their kids, which again is still a lot of money. But if it's like the family console, they might be more likely to spend on it than what they are going to be for a 350 or even 450 console. So yeah, I think that the Series S is a lot more appealing of a price point, and I think that it does a lot better to sort of offer alternatives for consoles for consumers, because obviously it's just a major difference between the Series S and Series X price point.
Yeah, I have to admit, I think I spoke about this on our last podcast, but I wasn't intending to get either of the Xboxes on launch. My ambition was always to get the PS5 on launch, but then pick up the Xbox further down the line. But given the price of the Xbox Series S, I'm almost certainly going to try and get it on launch now. And that's completely down to the fact that Microsoft saw that, not everyone's going to have this kind of money, especially this year, given the state of world economies right now. So I think from the PlayStation standpoint, it would have been so nice to have seen the digital version drop to somewhere around 300, because even though that's still not as cheap as the Series S, it's still going to be more powerful than the Series S. It's still going to have more access to the kind of things that the disc version is going to. But at the end of the day, given the rumours were a couple of months ago that it was going to be circa 500 quid for the disc version and 400 quid for the digital, I'm okay with the price it ended up as. It's about as expected. They've certainly learned from the PS3 launch, when that was retailing at $600 when they first announced it. So for me, it is a little expensive for my taste, but at the same time, it's roughly where I thought it was going to be, and frankly, it could have been a lot worse. So I'm generally okay with the prices that they ended up getting announced. Final question before we move on to the actual games that were revealed in this showcase, though. Has this price point swayed you on either of the disc or digital versions? Has it given you a bit of a clearer picture which one you're going to go for?
Yeah. So I think I'm going to go for the physical version, just as I mentioned. I mean, £100, it seems like a lot up front, but just like over the course of the lifetime that I'll probably have the console for, it just, I'd save it in the long run from just, borrowing games from friends or just buying a pre-owned copy. So I just don't think that the initial £100 just to get it a bit cheaper on launch makes sense, just to the later down the line.
I think we've both discussed this privately in the past as well, but we are both big fans of actual discs and cases and physical games. So yeah, I'm in the same bag. My pre-order was for the disc version. I can't give up the physical PlayStation copies, unfortunately. So let's crack into the games then. The bit that we're all interested in. So the first game that was revealed was Final Fantasy 16. Now, I have a bit of a hit and miss relationship with Final Fantasy. I've played 3 from the series. I loved Final Fantasy 6. I loved Final Fantasy 7. I really did not enjoy Final Fantasy 15. you have played, if not all, then the vast majority of Final Fantasies.
Yes.
And you were quick to mention to me when this was actually revealed that this may potentially sway your opinion on getting the PlayStation 5 early or leaving it a little later. So tell me your reaction. I didn't know this was coming. I didn't hear any rumours about this beforehand. Was this something that the Final Fantasy community were expecting to see released first and foremost? And, of course, what are your initial views on what we saw?
No, I didn't really see it coming either. There was like rumors circulating that, maybe there's going to be a new Final Fantasy 16 announced. I mean, especially like around about the time that the 7 remake development finished, there was sort of rumors saying, they're working on 16 as well in the background. But it sort of came out of nowhere, and the only thing that got me prepped for it is that I saw people before going, what are you looking for in this showcase? And it was like Silent Hill or Final Fantasy 16 or a couple of ones that didn't get announced. So there were some people hoping more than like, expecting it. But I'm super excited for it, and as I previously mentioned to you, that it will potentially sway me to getting it a lot sooner than I thought, just because the fact it is exclusive. Final Fantasy is one of the main games that I go for and play, and whenever there's one released, I look to get it and definitely play it. So it's but then sitting back from it and looking at it, I don't know if it's not gripped me the same way as the others were. I mean, Final Fantasy 15, I've got mixed opinions with, and I really liked the concept that they went for, and I thought it was a really cool theme, but I didn't think that it was still executed the way that it could have been and lived up to its potential. But when I was watching the initial trailers for it, I was super hyped for it, and I thought, wow, this looks amazing. But I've watched the 16 trailer a couple of times, and there just seems something missing. I don't know what it is. There just seems like there's not the same spark that I had with other sort of announcements, and it could partly come from there's not really much of a story that we've been shown in the trailer. I mean, you've only been given like a glimpse of it, and maybe it will come a lot. The hype will grow up a lot more when there's more information about it and you get to see a bit more about the world. But just my initial reaction wasn't. Well, my initial reaction was excitement, but the sort of the think back after the sort of the excitement had settled a bit was a bit like, but is it as amazing as I was hoping it to be?
Yeah, I think there's examples later on in this showcase of games that were announced / shown again that looked amazing when we first saw it, and then I've been thinking on it for a few days, and I still think it looks amazing. Final Fantasy 16 for me, I have to admit, I was at the time of this showcase, I was playing Psychonauts. I was doing a 100% run of Psychonauts, and I turned on the showcase to obviously keep track of what was happening. And the trailer started, and I watched it for about 50 seconds, and I was like, man, this is boring. And I turned around and I carried on playing a bit of Psychonauts and waiting for the next thing to come up, and completely missed that it was even a Final Fantasy game because I missed the logo. So my initial reaction, personally, very tepid. It didn't grip me. It fell into that hideous trailer trope that I cannot stand, of just splicing together random bits of dialogue that don't connect. So one minute they're saying, the crystals will guide our destiny, and oh my god, I can't believe you just did that, and you will betray my father, and then it's just back to normal, like I will protect the child with my life. I hate trailers that do that, because it's meant to be showing you, oh, look at all these cool things that are going to be happening in here, and for me, it's just like, this is just one big coherent sentence that doesn't make any sense to me. So I hated the way the trailer was laid out. In terms of what was shown, as a non-Final Fantasy, well, not as a non-Final Fantasy fan, but certainly someone that's not a passionate Final Fantasy fan, it looks to me like one of those games that I could take or leave. It kind of reminded me when, I can't remember the name of which one this was now. No, I don't want to take a punt on it. The Assassin's Creed that was set in the UK, in Victorian England.
Syndicate.
Yeah, Syndicate. Obviously, I was going to call it Odyssey, which I don't think is anywhere near right. I remember watching that trailer and thinking, you know what? This looks okay. Still not enough for me to go in for this. It looks different enough and cool enough, and it looks like it's going back to its roots a little bit more, in that we're going backwards in time into a more medieval feel than going forward in time to some futuristic dystopia. So I kind of looked at it and went, this looks more appealing to me than Final Fantasy 15 did, for example, but not appealing enough to me as a bit of a lapsed Final Fantasy fan to make me come back to this series. So I've read very mixed reviews on people's reactions to this. I think that anything with Final Fantasy on it is immediately going to get a load of attention. And like you say, there'll be people that didn't know this was coming, have seen it now and gone, right, well, that's my PlayStation pre-order sorted. I'm not missing out on Final Fantasy. But for me, I think I agree with you. There was just something missing with this one. It looks fine. It looks perfectly fine. But it just doesn't have that magic that even from like Final Fantasy VII, when I first played that in like 2018, when I looked up some trailers and footage of that, immediately I was gripped by that, and I just didn't feel it with Final Fantasy 16.
I've got some issues going into 16. I mean, I'm going to play it. Even if I end up thinking, wow, this looks terrible, I'll probably just go, well, I've got to play it just as, just that's what I've got to do. It's just part of my life. But I mean, it looks very, like you say, it's medieval, but it kind of looks even more like European style.
To me, it looks like Game of Thrones, Final Fantasy Game of Thrones. That's the vibe I get from it.
Yeah, and they've done one thing that I really hate, and they use proper English accents. And I mean, it sounds weird, 'cause obviously
really on the nose English accents. That English people are trying really hard to be English.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just so grating to my ears to hear. It's like in Breath of the Wild. I love that game, but every time I hear Zelda talk, I want to claw out my ears, because I just someone who's not English, it probably sounds lovely and it's like, wow, this is really nice, so elegant and so so pure. But for me, I'm just like, oh, that just sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? You sound like you're really trying to pretend to be like like posh English accent, and that's why all the characters from what I saw in the trailer just sounded like they had as well. It just sounded like I'm going to be constantly going that game and just like cringing, like going, oh no, don't talk to me, please. I just don't want to hear you. But yeah, and also the graphics. I mean, this is meant to be, next gen sort of game, but it just didn't really strike that for me. It looked like it was still the same sort of graphics for Final Fantasy 15 or Final Fantasy 14. It could even have been just like another expansion for 14. So they've got like millions now, but it just didn't really strike up. And even when you're seeing like the main character, the guy with the sort of black hair, I just instantly thought, wait, is this just like another Noctis clone or what? It could easily have just been, oh, here's another part of Final Fantasy 15, or here's like a extra content for 14. It just didn't really have that sort of wow graphics where it goes, this is a vast improvement on sort of the previous stuff, which I mean, I might be, particularly critical for, because obviously I do like the generation. I'm like, the series, I'm like, I want it to be perfect. But I don't know, that's just the problems that sort of I had with it after the dust settled.
Yeah, I should also say that I was initially quite worried about this entire showcase when the first thing that popped up when it actually loaded was the following was captured on PC, emulating the PS5 experience. Like, I'm sorry, what? This isn't even PS5 footage? But thankfully the rest of it was all PS5 footage. But I think Final Fantasy 16, there'll be plenty of people that are up for this, but for me, as an onlooker, it didn't initially grab me, which there are plenty of games on this list that certainly did. Speaking of one that did, for me personally, Miles Morales. Now, I am a massive, massive Spider-Man fan, have been for years, loved Spider-Man PS4, was bang up for Miles Morales. Obviously, there was a bit of initial confusion over what kind of game it would be, if it would be a much more short 10-hour kind of experience, if it would be its own 30-hour thing, but Sony and Insomniac have come out and clarified that a little bit more. We got a little bit of gameplay footage at this showcase. From where I sat, I thought it looked very nice. I thought it looked very good. We saw a bit of the differences between Miles Morales' moveset and Peter Parker's moveset in, some of the elemental abilities and any energy abilities that Miles Morales can control. His invisibility, I think, was briefly shown, if I remember correctly. So I thought it was a very nice demonstration of the differences and the similarities that we can expect between the Miles Morales Spider-Man and Peter Parker Spider-Man, because the combat looks basically identical, just with Miles's updated moveset. I also quite liked the kind of Spider-Man iconography that's being used quite a lot now, in the games like to tie themselves into, even just a little bit, even if it's a tongue-in-cheek way, like to tie themselves back into old movies. So I can't remember if this was put in one of the trailers, but there's a bit in Spider-Man where he's stopping a train with a load of webs and stuff, which is obviously a callback to the scene in the Tobey Maguire movie where he does it in Spider-Man 2. And here we had Miles Morales pulling the two sides of the bridges together like Tom Holland does in Homecoming with the boat. So I liked some of the interweaving of the different variations of Spider-Man. I like the fact it feels more connected. I'm personally still interested to see how the story is going to allow for the existence of both Miles Morales and Peter Parker in a game where only Miles Morales, by the looks of things, is going to be featured. It feels like Peter Parker is going to be completely removed from this. So I'm interested to see how they're going to explain that in storyline, etc. But on the whole, I thought it was quite encouraging. I didn't see anything there that made me worry in the same way that I have with Marvel's Avengers footage, for instance. I don't know how interested you are in getting the Miles Morales game, but did you see anything in this that made you think any more or less of this game?
I mean, like, I really liked the original Spider-Man game when that came out, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And when this one was announced, I was like, oh, yeah, that'd be cool. I'm looking forward to play that. But then when they say it was like kind of based like an expansion-esque style of game, it's not like the full sequel. I was a little turned off from it, but watching the trailer, I mean, it looked like something that I was still interested to play. I mean, I still want to play more in that Spider-Man world, and this looks like a very cool storyline to go along. So I'm definitely going to pick it up. I mean, they said it was going to be on the PS4, so I'll probably pick it up sooner just on the PS4 rather than sort of going over to the PS5, because they've got better controls on the 5. They've got like that dual haptic, whatever it's called, which they're integrating on the PS5 controllers, which obviously made me like, oh, you can have spider senses in your thumbs where analogs like tingle a bit or something along that vein. So I don't think that's enough of a sell to make me want to actually just get it on the PS5. I'd sooner just get it on the PS4 if I don't get the PS5, that is, obviously. But yeah, it looked good, but then it didn't look spectacular again. It just looked like it was the same sort of Spider-Man. Again, it obviously comes from the fact that this isn't a full sequel, but it just did look like it was just a continuation of the story. It could easily have just been more DLC. I mean, the colors look a lot prettier, and it does look very pretty, like especially like the vivid colors they've got, like especially on like the purples and stuff. It looks very pretty and a little bit more cartoony. But yeah, that's what I think. And the issue I have is the story length. I mean, like the Uncharted Lost Legacy was a similar vein of this isn't a sequel. This is more like a extended DLC game thing, and that was relatively short. I mean, Uncharted is never a long game, but I think this one was short in comparison to that. So it makes you think how long this game's actually going to be and how much depth they're going to go with it. I mean, I'd much rather have seen Miles in the sequel as like the standalone character. I mean, like the Spider-Man film came out a couple of years ago, the Into the Spider-Verse showed, there's a lot of appeal for Miles, and I think I would have liked to have seen that sort of style, maybe a bit more like cartoony in the game, maybe a bit more like they've got like vivid colors, but make it really more vivid style and just make it look different to the Peter Parker style Spider-Man in just like the game design a little bit, making it, you can still see it's the same sort of game in that, but just having like a color refresh palette maybe.
Yeah, I mean, to me it does look like more of the same. I'm not against that because I thought the original Spider-Man was fantastic. But yeah, I do kind of also feel the same as you, that it would have been nice for Miles Morales to have his own spin-off series off the back of the original Peter Parker Spider-Man. My initial thought when I first played Spider-Man PS4 was that we'd get to a point where maybe in Spider-Man 2 Peter Parker ended up dying and Miles Morales would take over his mantle, and then the third game of the trilogy would be all about him. So it's not what I predicted. It's not the way I thought it was going to go. But if Miles Morales ends up becoming its own spin-off series, its own spin-off franchise, and this is the first step to it, I think it's going to be a very exciting time for the character that is, to be honest, a very underrated character in the Spider-Man universe. There's so many other Spider-Men that have been spun off in various different ways, 2099 for example, that I just think don't deserve the kind of spotlight that I think that could be offered to Miles Morales. So I'm looking forward to it. I am looking forward to it. I think it's going to be an enjoyable time. But I do agree with you that the the length of it will ultimately, I think, determine my love of it, because I have a sinking feeling it's going to be priced at, 50 quid. And if it's only a 10 to 15 hour experience, am I going to enjoy that as much? Am I going to appreciate that as much? I don't know. But I can't say this this showcase changed my mind on it. I thought it looked fantastic, and I'm still looking forward to getting my hands on it. However, the next one, oh boy howdy, Hogwarts Legacy. So, I am not the biggest Harry Potter fan. Enjoyed the books, didn't love them, didn't really enjoy the movies. But one thing I've always loved about Harry Potter is the universe. And I've said to you in the past that if they ever do a Harry Potter RPG or a Star Wars RPG, which is another series that I like but don't love, then if it was just build your own character in this universe, we'll tell our own story with the assets, that I would be bang up for it. And Hogwarts Legacy is exactly that from what we saw. It looks to me like Bully or Canis Canem edits if you're in the UK here. But with wands, and that is exactly what I wanted from this game, which we've kind of known about unofficially for a few years now, and I was only officially revealed here in this showcase. There are obvious caveats, of course, with the current issues surrounding J.K. Rowling and transphobic comments that she's been making on her own social media and various other platforms, which obviously put a little cloud over this. But in terms of a standalone game, if I was to look at it just from what we were shown in this showcase, I think this is possibly the most exciting announcement of the entire showcase for me.
I don't know if it's my most exciting release on there. I mean, it looks cool. I've grown up in a very strong Harry Potter focused fandom. Well, not myself, but within my family. I mean, my mum's a massive Harry Potter fan. So as a kid, I grew up and I loved it. I loved the films, loved the books, and even some of the games. But then as I've grown older, I've sort of grown distant from it. It's just I don't know. It's just not my interests anymore. And I've seen that there's so many other things that I adore so much more. And I think that there are so many other great franchises that deserve, if not more love than what Harry Potter. I feel Harry Potter absorbs a lot of love for some reason, which I don't quite get. I don't understand where it all comes from. But yeah, and as you said, I was a little bit cautious when they announced it, because I was like, Harry Potter at the moment. I don't know if I'm on board with that. But they came out and they said that JK's not had involvement with the game, and they're kind of trying to separate the ties, sort of, to go, guys, don't worry, she's not involved. We did this ourselves. So yeah, that's kind of like the way to sort of get around it. But as for the game, trying to remove all sort of like politics from it, I thought it did look quite fun. As I kind of mentioned there, I adored I didn't adore, but I very much enjoyed the first 3 Harry Potter games. So on like the GameCube, not the Philosopher's Stone, on the PlayStation 1 with their nightmarish Hagrids.
I mean, I enjoyed those, but for ironic reasons, really, rather than their gameplay quality.
But yeah, the reason I liked them a lot is because they had an open world Hogwarts, and you could go around, you attended classes, and a lot of the focus was on, hey, you're at school, and you had all these quirky missions where you're just going around the school, go into potions classes, or sneak around the secret rooms and like the passageways to get to places. And they were actually very fun and made you, as like a kid, it made you feel like you're actually in the Harry Potter world. Like Prisoner of Azkaban was probably my favorite one, where they did it. You had like the broom that you could fly around the grounds, and you could have Quidditch, and it was like the proper Quidditch game. And then on like the Game Boy, because I played both, because that much of a Harry Potter fan, was so good, because it changed the game completely to it, because you had a lot more limitations of what it could do, and it made it into like a Final Fantasy style game where it was like turn-based combat, and that was phenomenal. But then the games kind of got worse as they went on, but this looks like it's actually going to be a fun and like expansive like Hogwarts world where you can actually go to class. I hope that's one of the things that they capitalize on. I hope that this isn't just like you spend an hour at school, and now you're off on your adventure. Go explore. I hope you go through, like the years, at least, at least 1 year there, and actually feel like you're at school and capitalize. Because I mean, that's the main thing people want in a Harry Potter game. It's Hogwarts. They don't care. Oh, I've got a wand and I'm going to go fight this boogeyman. I mean, the villain looks like a Halloween villain. Like it looks like he's got like a Halloween mask on, like a skull. It looks very weird. I don't know what their story is going to be to actually make it feel like it's a cool story outside of the school, because
that's something to mention actually, is that this is set in the 1800s, so it's 200 odd years before the events of the books. So there's going to be no Lord Voldemort. There's going to be none of the stuff that we're accustomed to from the Harry Potter series. This is a whole new adventure in the Harry Potter universe. I don't know technically what it's called. I suppose it's just Planet Earth, really, isn't it? But it's its own separate adventure set 200 years beforehand. So it will be interesting to see how they change the lore in their own way and create a new set of villains, whatever these skull-wearing villains are going to end up wanting, and how they're going to end up using their magic. It's going to be completely separate from what we know. So there's plenty of room here for experimentation.
Yeah. As I finished it, I was a bit cautious because I loved what they were showing of being in the school, and I was like, wow, this is cool. If the whole game is literally just go into Hogwarts and there's some fun havoc to reign just being in school, like a teen drama, but in the Harry Potter world, then I'm down for that. But with the whole you're going to create your own adventure and it's going outside Hogwarts, it just made me a bit more like, is this just going to be a fantasy game which has the backdrop of look, wands, it's Harry Potter,
RPG elements in it. I think I'd agree with you that a Persona style life sim with maybe not the dungeon crawling that Persona has, but that kind of feel that you have your own personal life during the day, and then you are battling monsters and progressing the story in other aspects, would be fantastic. But equally, like I say, it to me looks like Bully with wands, and Bully was fantastic. So I'm absolutely stoked for Hogwarts Legacy. Obvious issues surrounding whether or not J.K. Rowling will be getting any royalties off me aside, this game just looks fantastic, and I cannot wait to get my hands on this. It's one of those games that I'll probably get when it releases. That's the level of excitement just one trailer imbued on me. We should move on to a trailer that I don't think stirred either of us, which was Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Now, I have long since moved out of my Call of Duty phase. The last one I really, really enjoyed was World at War, which is still one of my favourite games, but was, 2008?
So long ago.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that I mention to other people and they go, really? World at War is your favourite? Yeah. I know that neither of us have a lot to say on this because we've both kind of moved away from Call of Duty as a franchise. But what I will say is that for me personally, I know there is obviously one huge outlier in this statement. But for me, I've always felt Call of Duty was at its best when it focused on actual real-life conflicts rather than making up its own ones. The obvious exception being COD 4, Modern Warfare. Outside of COD 4, I never really felt like the others really matched the kind of quality that we got from the original Call of Duties and from World at War. So I'm glad they've gone to the Cold War. I'm glad they're going back to an actual real-life conflict. But there was nothing in this that made me go, yeah, this is the Call of Duty that will get me back in, personally.
It's the same with me. I played bits, I played like half the campaign of their new Modern Warfare. And it was a decent campaign. I mean, it had, some fun action. It's like the action movie of video games. And, that was fun just to go through like mindlessly, having a backstory that was somewhat interesting, as you would expect with, I don't know, like an Expendables film or something of like similar vein, where it's not exactly gonna get you really thinking, but it's just fun just to watch. And so yeah, but before that I haven't really played one for a while because I've moved off them. But this looks like it's going back to the good sort of stuff. Black Ops 2 was probably my favorite Call of Duty game. It had everything that I liked because it tried to do more with the story, where it was just had the bits where you could actually impact what happens, and it was like, your actions actually have some weight to what's happening. And I hope this one does follow that, and it's good that they're actually going back to story, because obviously Black Ops 4 was pretty much just all online. And that's a weird thing, obviously they had Black Ops 4, which was the weird 4 Roman numerals rather than doing like the IV, which is more commonly known. Why did they drop the Roman numerals? Why didn't they do the 5 Roman eyes? But maybe that was like the heat of the debate of going, right, we want to move forward back into the story world. Let's drop the eyes.
Yeah, we're getting really deep into the weeds if that's what you noticed, because I didn't even think of that. But more power to you for noticing that, I think. Yeah, I think you kind of I think we've kind of encapsulated each other's feelings really. Call of Duty, great, but it's not really for me. I'm sure there are hundreds of thousands of teenagers that saw this and went, "Oh, great! Now I can play COD when the PS5 comes out." But for me, it's just not my kind of game. I watched him pull a pin on a grenade, put it in someone's pocket, and then push them away. And I'm meant to be going, "Oh, that's so cool." And for me, it's like, "Oh yeah, great."
As I said, I think it's a cool action game, which it does look very pretty. And I don't want to take anything away from Call of Duty, because what they do well, and they've got a very good game. It's just not for me. The interesting thing I want to see is what the celebrity is going to be. Who's that? It's always what I look out for, of going, who's in this one?
I'll tell you what, this is completely unrelated to COD. It's actually in relation to a game that we haven't mentioned yet, but I could have sworn I saw Mads Mikkelsen pop up in one of the trailers, and then I watched it back and was like, that is definitely not Mads Mikkelsen. So let's move on to another one that hopefully caught our attention a bit more, which is Deathloop. Now, I was completely befuddled by this trailer when I first watched it. I've watched it back, I've done some more reading up on it, and I'm in a really weird place with this game. So, on the one hand, when I actually read the synopsis for it, I thought it sounded really cool. But having watched the trailer, having seen some other people's reactions to it, it seems like the consensus so far is, it looks good, but I'm not going to play it. What was your initial reaction to Deathloop?
I just don't get it. Is my thing. I watched the whole thing, and I've watched it a few times now, and I just can't work it out. I can't work out where the game is. Is my main thing. I think it's got a cool art style. It's got like that espionage, like 60s thing, kind of like Archer, like especially with like the with the orange and like the talking about the actual backdrop. But I don't see where the game is. It talks about we've got all these time loops and you've got to go around and kill all these people, but obviously that it doesn't. What is it going to be, a mission based thing? I assume this is all offline. There can't be an online aspect to this, because then that would just be...
Actually there is. So let me give you the synopsis of it, because I read it earlier to clarify that I understood exactly what this game was, and just in words it sounds really cool. So let me take you through this. The concept of Deathloop is that the main character, called Colt, is the only person that realizes that the day ends and then it restarts from the very beginning, and it just keeps replaying itself over and over and over again, right? And the day is set on a party full of a load of extravagant, unpleasant people who all get wasted and, commit crimes and do all kinds of ungodly things, because as soon as the loop starts again, everything they've done resets, and there are no consequences, and no matter how drunk they get, for instance, they don't wake up in the next loop with a massive hangover. So everything is irrelevant when the loop restarts. Now, Colt has 8 people in this party that he has to kill to end the loop. But if one of them survives the loop, everyone survives the loop. So he has to kill all 8 of them in one day to make sure the loop ends. However, like I say, if one survives, then everyone survives. So you have to basically espionage your way around this party, figure out the best opportunities to kill each of these 8 people, and the order that you should do it, so that you can most effectively kill all 8 of them and complete the game. That in itself is a really great concept. The multiplayer comes in. I think her name's Juliana. There was a woman near the end of that trailer who sniped Colt. The multiplayer aspect comes in, where if I play with you, for instance, and I'm playing as Colt, and I'm trying to kill all 8 of those people before the loop ends, you as Juliana, your job is to stop me from killing all 8 of those people and preserving the loop. So when I put it in words, I think, man, that sounds like a really cool concept. But I watched that trailer, and I've watched Deathloop trailers and bits of information they've shown previously, and every single time I've watched it, I've just gone, what is that? where is the game in it? What is the structure of it? What is it? But then when I actually read it in words, I thought that sounds like a really cool concept. But I agree with you. The trailer just, for me, it didn't do a good enough job of explaining exactly what it was straight off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that like the explanation makes it sound a lot better than what it did, because like as you watch it, you just go, huh? How does this work? Like, where's the actual like the loop thing? And so like even for that, it's just like, how long is the day? Like, why can't you just run around and just kill them all independently? And the idea that, you know, I was formulating is that, does it have to be that obviously he's going around, he's manipulating everyone and going, you know, so I've stopped him from making that scientific breakthrough. So, yeah, does that then go, do you have to do that each loop? Or I assume it's just one big entire level, but I don't know. The trailer didn't express what it was about, and it just didn't make it look as cool as what the concept is. I mean, there's been a lot of these like time loop things. I mean, like Outer Wilds did it, and that's, you know, very very loved game where it did like that whole loop thing, and there's like the 12 minutes as well, where it's that romantic dinner which then ends in death, and sort of you trying to fix it. And yeah, they seem like they've got a lot better grips with sort of doing these like time loop concepts. But I just think there's still a tricky thing in game to actually get along the gimmick of, oh, it's actually a loop, especially this one. It doesn't feel like the loop is that much of a core gimmick, and the rest of the game feels like it's going to be a very short sort of mission sort of thing.
I think my interest in this will swing entirely on its price point, because like I say, as a written concept, I think it sounds really cool. But if it's 54 quid, there's still too many questions for me to, you know, commit that kind of money to it. So I'm very torn on this. Like I say, everyone that I've seen pass comment on it has basically said it looks really cool, but I don't get it and it's not for me. And when you actually hear it spelled out in words, I think it's a really cool concept that I just don't know if the marketing so far has really fully explained and really got people hyped about. But it's an interesting one. It's also obviously a Bethesda project is what I was trying to say. And one of those two games, along with, I think it's Ghostwire Tokyo or Tokyo Ghostwire, I can't remember which way around it goes now, that Microsoft have already said will remain PS5 exclusive. So I'm interested to see what happens with it, and I'm certainly interested to see what its sales figures are like, because every review of it so far I've seen of it has just been, I like it, but I won't get it. Resident Evil Village, however, I have seen many people really excited for this. I am not the biggest fan of horror games. I like very particular horror games, and for some reason the Amnesia series I really like, but Resident Evil I wouldn't touch with a 5-foot pole. I don't have an explanation for why, because clearly the Resident Evil series is better. But there's something about horror games in general that I'm very particular about, and the Resident Evil series has never really breached or broken that glass ceiling for me to make me think this is a horror game I could play. You, however, have experience with Resident Evil. What did you make of Resident Evil Village?
with the Resident Evil.
With the entire Resident Evil.
It's a singular resident. Yeah, I haven't actually played 7 just because I like the older sort of Resident Evil 2 remake. I thought was spectacular, and that was where I was hoping they were going to go with Resident Evil 8. I was hoping it was going to be along that vein. They'd shown that sort of classic style of Resident Evil with a modern twist can work, and that was more my cup of tea. When I've watched 7, it looks like a very good horror game, and bits that I have watched of it does look super spoopy, but it just doesn't feel like Resident Evil, whereas 8 does feel a lot more like Resident Evil, and now makes me want to go back and play 7, because I'm like, I want to play that one. I think 8, it just looks it looks so twisted and sort of scary and new sort of thing. Like they've got that whole like story tale bit where it's like going with like the weird 2D graphics if it's like telling a story, and it was going through, and it kind of looks like it's trying to be a bit more like Resident Evil 4 in style, which probably means nothing to you. But so it's kind of like obviously it's like called Village, and a lot of bit about Resi 4 was set around like this village in Spain, Mexico. I don't know what one it was.
Spexico, that's fine.
Spexico. It might have even been either. That would be embarrassing. But for Spexico. But and there's also it goes on later in the game to be a bit more medieval in style, which 8 looks like it's got a similar thing. It's like you start off in sort of like a villagey style bit, and then you've got that castle at the end. And there's even a guy who looks like the merchant who was in 4, and he sold you all of your wares and would go, "What are you buying?" But wouldn't actually, or what are you selling even, and wouldn't actually buy Ashley, even though he wanted to get rid of her. So it looks like they're going along. It feels a lot more like Resident Evil, and I'm not saying it's going to be related to 4 in any way, but it just feels like they're in a similar like theme and like mindset that it makes it feel a lot more like Resi, and made me actually go, I need to actually play 7 now because it looks super cool, and find out what the hell they're doing to Chris this time, because Chris changes so much in not only look but what they do with him, and now he looks like he's changed yet again. So I want to know what they've done to my beloved Chris.
Well, I'm going to take your word for that. I'm going to take your word for that on that analysis of Chris. But at the end of the day, there are some Resident Evils that I look at and think, man, I should play that, and then it comes to me starting a new game and I just think, oh my god, I'm not touching Resident Evil. I'm just going to sit on my sofa and cry for the next 3 days. So I looked at this trailer and I thought it looks like a fantastic horror game. Is it one I'm going to pick up? Probably not, just because, like I say, for some reason I look at Resident Evil and I just think, too spoopy for me. But it looked very good for what we saw. Another series that I've not touched yet, Devil May Cry. There was an announcement for Devil May Cry 5. From what I understand, and you may be able to correct me, it's a remastered edition of a previous entry in the Devil May Cry franchise.
Yep, yeah, that's correct.
Okay, it certainly looked very impressive, and from a tech demonstration standpoint of the power of the PS5, etc., I've watched it back a couple of times now, and the sheer amount of colours and graphics and imagery and stuff that's all over the screen, and you can see sword swipes and just the explosions, and it just visually it looks fantastic. And if the PlayStation 5 can handle all of those assets on screen and all of those colour flares and everything else, then I can understand why Devil May Cry has been brought back as a PS5 release, because it would be, from the list that I'm looking at in front of me, it's one of the best tech demonstration games they could have released for the PS5 in my opinion. But as someone that's never played Devil May Cry, not because I'm not interested in it, it's just I don't know where to start with it at this point really, this feels like a good entry point for someone like me.
Yeah, I agree. It looked super pretty. I mean, I'm all about DAP ray tracing. Yeah, it looked very, very, very pretty and like lots of nice colours. But so it is, yeah, it is basically a digital, a new enhanced version of the original. There's some changes as well. It looks like you're going to be able to play as Virgil in the game, which you couldn't in the original. So it looks like they're going to be adding a small bit of story, or just let you go through the missions and play as him. They kind of did a similar thing with DMC, which was their dabble into a reboot of the franchise before they decided, no, actually, let's not reboot it. Let's go back to the originals. And they did like an enhanced version where they kind of released it, a bit better graphics for PS4, and they added, you could play as Virgil for a bit more, and they added a bit more content that way. And I think they did the same with Devil May Cry 4. So they've got, it's a common thing that they love to do over at Capcom. But it looked very pretty, and I've played all of I've got a love-hate relationship with Devil May Cry because I've played them all, and whenever a new one comes out, I'm like, I want to play that. And then I play it and I realize, it was all right. I didn't love it. I kind of got a bit bored, but I'm still going to play the next one. So I don't know what I've got. I don't know what my hook is in the industry, where I get in the franchise, where I'm constantly like, I need to play more of it. I'm not going to love it, but I need it.
There's some kind of low-level addiction issue there with Devil May Cry, I think. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want either of us to sound like cats, or look at the pretty colours. But visually, it did look so nice. It did look so pretty with all the explosions of colour. And like I say, I can perfectly understand why that's going to be a release title, even just digital, because it's a fantastic tech demo for the PS5 and what it can maintain. So I can perfectly understand why it was announced. But hopefully this is my entry into the Devil May Cry series, because it's one of those franchises that I keep looking at and think I'll get to you one day, and then just never do. Let's move on to the next one then. I know a franchise that you've not played yet, one that I've played a little bit of, so we can't go too in depth into this. Oddworld Soulstorm, of course, is an Abe game. It's had a couple of resurgences in the past. The original two on the PlayStation were very, very well received. There was obviously the remaster a couple of years ago, or the remake, I should say, a couple of years ago. So it's still in the public consciousness. It's not like it's a sequel that's come from nowhere. In terms of what I thought of it, I love the world of Abe, and I love the story of it. It's so tonally different to everything I played on the PS1 as a kid. But for me, the gameplay is what I really struggled with. Not that it's bad in any regard, but it's just not where I find the kind of enjoyment that I do with PlayStation 1 games. I'm much more of a Crash and Spyro kind of guy rather than Abe. So I have an enormous amount of respect for Abe and the Oddworld series, but to me this looks like the enhanced modern version of the originals, dialed up to 100. And if you are an Oddworld fan, that is absolutely fantastic and exactly what you want. For me, as someone that loved the world of it, but just couldn't get on with the gameplay, it feels like it's going to pass me by, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, as you said, I've never played an Oddworld or an Abe game. And it's always been one of the ones where I've seen it so many times and I'm like, I should probably play that. And then I just never have, because something else has sort of grabbed my attention. I know, obviously, that the first game had a lot of cool story points. And, it had that, but it's never been a franchise to grab me. And this one, like you said, it didn't do anything to win me over. It looked funny, but the overall sort of game, it didn't look too appealing. And it's one of those games that if it was there and I had it, then I'd be like, okay, maybe I'll give this a go. But it didn't really pique my interest for it. As you said earlier, you was playing Psychonauts and went back to that during the Final Fantasy one. If I had been playing Psychonauts, then I might have done so during the Oddworld.
I mean, from everything I know about Oddworld, from the amount I've played of the original, it's got everything I loved about the original. It's got the same character, the same that same magnetism, that appeal, that world that I loved so much about the original Oddworlds. But it is basically the same, from what I could see at least. It's basically the same formula with, panel to panel, 2D, and manipulating this object and controlling these characters, etc., etc. And it just, the gameplay aspect is what I really didn't enjoy about Oddworld, and it looks like that's all scaled up. So if you're a massive Oddworld fan, then this is going to be so good, so perfect for you. But yeah, for me, it just more of the same is not what I was looking for with Abe. But if you are an Abe fan, then I'm sure you are absolutely all over this. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach is the official title. Now, I've played a bit of Five Nights at Freddy's because it was just one of those hugely popular, basically meme games that comes out every once in a while that really kind of took off in a way that stuff like Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy and I Am Bread just didn't, in as much as it survived that first month of everyone playing it on YouTube and all your friends asking you about it at school. So I've played the original. I haven't really dabbled in the others because, from the outside looking in, they looked pretty repetitive. They looked like the same thing over and over. The one thing that jumped out at me with this one was not only the tone and the presentation of the story and the characters in this one, but also the fact it almost looks like fully realised 3D environments. It almost looks like it's going to be its own walk around this environment and try and avoid the threats, rather than here's a static screen of basically management sim mechanics of managing the power in this door and managing your cameras, etc. It looks like it's going to be a step forward for the Five Nights at Freddy's series, and something a bit new, which I would welcome enormously, because I think the original concept of Five Nights at Freddy's is a little played out at this point. I don't know what your history is with Five Nights at Freddy's, but as a teaser trailer, did this grab you?
Well, the yes and no. I mean, it's a franchise. It's a bit is a bit spooky. And even though I say I play Resident Evil, as similar with you. I don't really do horror because I wet myself constantly. So I've never really played the first Five Nights. It's been of those ones where it's like, oh, if I pluck the courage up one day, I'll give it a go because I know it's such a big hit and it's well loved. And this one, again, just sort of, it made me really think I should really get around to playing these. And as you said, it looks like you can actually explore the environment a lot more. It looks like it'll be a bit more like an Amnesia or even a Resi 7, where you can walk around and it's first person and you interact with things and know the things are going to chase you and the AI is going to be a real pain in the butt of doing stuff. So yeah, it looked like a cool trailer, but I don't know. I feel like it's one of the ones we're going to need to see more of before we can actually think about whether it's actually going to be a cool way to go the franchise, or they're just going to keep using the same sort of gimmicks that they're known for, which is there's nothing wrong with it, but you do want to have a refresh of the industry for it.
Yeah, I think Five Nights at Freddy's as a series just desperately needs a shot in the arm of something, and this looks like it's going to address that. So I'm all up for Five Nights at Freddy's fans getting a fully remade kind of take on the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. But for me, I think it will be one of those ones that I will have to see the next trailer to get a better image of what it is first before I start thinking about whether or not I'm going to commit myself to it. Because if it is open worlds, if it is that kind of Amnesia style, then it might play into my kind of interest in horror games a bit more. But if it's going to end up being another sit in front of a screen and click this and manage that, it's just I'm past that particular bent of Five Nights at Freddy's and horror games in general. Another one then that I loved the look of, almost my highlight, was Demon's Souls. Now, I haven't played the original Demon's Souls. I've played Bloodborne and absolutely adore it. Haven't gotten around to Dark Souls yet, but this just looks like the perfect game to be remastering for the PlayStation 5.
It looks so gosh darn pretty. I would actually say that this is the game that actually made it look like it was next gen out of all of them. It just looked so breathtaking in like the visuals. They just like so much detail and it looked so fluid. I mean, there was no loading screens, and so it just looked just so smooth and everything looked nice, which obviously is going to be the case for the show. They're not going to go, here's this game, and it makes it look really scrappy and looks crap. But it just looked the most next gen and going, okay, this is what we're in for in terms of like graphics and just the way that it just feels and looks.
Yeah, I have to say I thought it was really cleverly put together as well, that particular trailer, because if you are a complete novice to Demon's Souls and you don't know what to expect from that franchise, when it started out and the main character is just cutting down all of these guys that he's coming in contact with, and it just looks so simple, and then they got to the boss fight and he just got absolutely wailed and destroyed. I thought the structure of it was so good, that yes, you can be really good at moving through these levels, but the bosses are their own entire beast. And having played Bloodborne, you having played Bloodborne and Dark Souls as well, we all have our stories about the bosses in these kinds of games. So I thought it was a really, really fantastic way to present Demon's Souls to a complete newbie. But in terms of someone that has a bit of, like I say, I've not actually physically played it, but someone that has a bit of knowledge on this series and is actually really interested in getting this, I thought it looked sublime. Absolutely fantastic. So I don't know if it'll be a launch title for me, but it's definitely one I want to get around to because it just looks like an absolutely fantastic remaster. Or remake, I should say.
Yeah. So, I mean, you said that the Harry Potter announcement was sort of your standout from the show. But, I mean, I know we'd already had Demon's Souls announced, but, I mean, seeing that trailer made me realize, wow, yeah, I really want to play this game now, because before I'd seen it I was like, okay, this is cool, I'm looking forward to play it. I've never played Demon's Souls, so it'd be cool to see what it's got to offer, but I was never really that excited. But now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, I actually really want to give this a go. and I've not played the original, so I'll be happy to see what the story's like. And unlike Final Fantasy VII Remake, if they make a change, I won't know, and I won't have awful feelings in my mouth when I realise that they've changed stuff.
Yeah, it's almost a shame, isn't it, that we didn't have time to go back into our what are we playing in this podcast. Because, yeah, the difference in your opinion between the last podcast and this one about Final Fantasy VII Remake is almost a podcast in itself. But we'll have to save it. We'll have to save it for a later date, unfortunately. Speaking of moving on, we'll make this quick. Fortnite is coming to PS5. Thanks. So next up was the PS Plus collection. Look, to be serious, Fortnite coming to the PS5, fine. I kind of assumed that it was taken on faith that it would be on the PS5 anyway. So fine, it needed to be officially announced. Yeah, fine, great, cool. But it wasn't anything that gripped anyone. It didn't reveal anything new. It was just, by the way, PS5 will support Fortnite. Fantastic. So the PS Plus collection. It kind of feels like this is the answer that Sony have come up with to the Game Pass. I don't know if we can officially label it as that, because it feels more like a catch-up for those people who are returning to PlayStation after going to Xbox for the last generation. That's what it feels like to me. The PS Plus collection, if you don't know, is going to be a massive collection of, I think, about 18, I read, of PS4 titles that kind of defines the generation that will be available for free to download if you have a PS Plus subscription. Included in it are Bloodborne, Persona 5, God of War, The Last of Us Remastered, a cluster that I'm forgetting, but some of the biggest and heaviest hitters from the PS4 era. Looking into this from a distance without knowing all the full details of where it's going to go in the future, if they're going to be adding more games to it, if they do add more games to it, will it end up being backwards compatible kind of titles? Will it be exclusively PS4 titles, etc.? We don't know all the details, but on the face of it, this looks like really good value for a release of the PS5 collection of some of the PS4 games that you might not have been able to get your hands on previously. There's a couple in there that I will almost certainly download when I get my PS5, for instance, and I suspect one of these games will probably be the first game I play on my PS5 as well. So what's your initial reaction to the PS Plus collection?
Yeah, I think I read that they said that they're not looking to try and replicate the Game Pass model. So yeah, I feel like this is just going to be a standalone go. Hey, here's the games, and it's more of a way of just being, when you buy the console, yeah, we've got these launch games, but you can also play these PS4 games, which you probably missed a few of them. So I think it's more of a way of just making the PS5 look a bit more appetizing on launch and like on purchase, which is absolutely fine. I think it's a great thing that they've done, and as similar to what you said, there's a few games on there that I haven't managed to play yet, and when I get my PS5, will no doubt use that model to play them. Just because it doesn't make sense anymore to just go out and buy Uncharted 4, because I can just play it when I've got the PS5 and got the PlayStation Plus, which I'll have for it. So yeah, I think it's a cool thing. I don't think there's going to be much more in it, but I mean, I don't think there has to be much more in it. If they've said that they don't want to do a Game Pass style thing, then I don't think that they needed to add any more to it, because yeah, it is what it is. It's basically the PlayStation classics like they did for when they made the PS4, or what they did for the PS3, but they're just having it moving forward. So I think it's a cool thing, but I don't know, it didn't particularly sway me more onto going, I'm going to buy it now. It just made me think, when I get the console, that's a cool thing to have, and I'm glad they've done that.
Yeah, I'd love to think of this as the gateway into a sort of backwards compatibility Xbox Game Pass kind of format / feature for the PlayStation. I'd love to see games like Spyro and Crash end up on it. I'd like to see games like Castlevania Symphony of the Night from the PS1 in this Plus collection. Some of the classics from the PS2, San Andreas and Bully, and Simpsons Hit and Run is another one off the top of my head. Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, I know that's getting a remaster, but I'd love to see some of the old classics from the PlayStation backlog appear in the Plus collection. My gut feeling is that's not on the direction they're going to take it, but as a collection that's available as soon as you get that console, I think it's a really fantastic addition to the release. And like I say, the game that I will probably play first on my PlayStation 5 is in that Plus collection. So I think it's excellent. I think it's a really nice idea. I just hope there's more to it than an excellent selling point for the PS5.
What is that game?
Well, let's discuss, shall we? The final reveal of this PS5 showcase was God of War Ragnarok. Now, this is a game that everyone has been looking forward to essentially since God of War 4 came out. We are in a very difficult position on this podcast with this game because I have played the original 3 God of Wars on the PS2 and the PS3 and loved them. You have played God of War 4, but not the original trilogy across the PS2 and the PS3. So we are both coming at this from very different angles when it comes to God of War Ragnarok. You and I both enjoy mythology, and I know you are more into your Greek mythology, but my favourite kind of mythology is Norse. So by default, I should have been bang up for God of War when it came out on PS4, but I held off because I thought, no, I'm gonna play the original trilogy, I'm gonna get an understanding of what this series is, and then I'm gonna go into God of War 4. So I played the original trilogy. I sat down to start God of War 4. I read some of the reviews. I saw some of the footage online, and I thought, man, this looks like a game I'm gonna hate. So I held off. You, on the other hand, really liked God of War 4, and I remember you were around my flat once upon a time when we were allowed to see each other in actual life, and you played a little bit. You played a little bit of the original God of War, and you were taken aback by how different the two were. So we are coming at this from two very, very different angles, and yet I think that we are both incredibly excited about God of War Ragnarok. The thing for me is that almost certainly now that God of War Ragnarok has been announced, the God of War 4, God of War PS4, whatever you want to call it, will almost certainly be the game I have to play now because I want to play God of War Ragnarok. For a bunch of different reasons we'll get into in a minute. But for my part, this was a really exciting reveal. It's nice to know that it's coming, and it's given me an extra kick to finally get back to God of War. I'll go through my reasoning in a second, but initially, your thoughts on this reveal?
Well, I mean, when it happened, it was super shocking. I was like, oh, finally, we get it announced. But after hearing that you're now going to play, when I finally heard that you're actually going to play God of War and you really wanted to play Ragnarok, I lost my shit, and that made this the most shocking announcement on that thing. I was like, wait, what? You hated the way that God of War 4 was going. You was like, I'm not interested in it. And then to hear that you actually wanted to play Ragnarok and changed your whole opinion, I was like, holy chickens, what the hell's happened?
Maybe I should address this before you give your full interest in this game then. So from my perspective, what made God of War 1 to 3 so good is that they were able to factor in so many parts of Greek mythology and so many gods in Greek mythology, especially God of War 3. I mean, God of War 3 is basically a rogues gallery of all the biggest and most popular Greek gods, and it's Kratos' job to kill them all. And it's such a fantastic experience because as a fan of mythology, I look at these gods and I read about them in Stephen Fry books and such, and they're just the most fascinating stories and the most fascinating characters. To then be able to actually be in a situation where not only are they in front of me and be able to interact with them, but also to discover that they hate me and my very existence, and it's now my job to kill them to survive. I love the way that the original God of War trilogy explores the Greek gods, the way God of War 1 especially is so good in the way it depicts the clash between Kratos and Ares. I love the way they use the characters. I love the way they tell the stories. And I just think that the original trilogy is fantastic. God of War 4 is obviously a lot more story-driven and tries to change the tone a bit. It's not just about Kratos hacking and slashing his way through a rogues gallery of various different gods and creatures. It's more about the story of Kratos and his boy. So, for me, the switch is fine. I haven't got a problem with it. But it's the exact opposite of what I loved about the original trilogy. And like I say, I've seen gameplay footage, I've read reviews, I've listened to reviews, and the camera being behind Kratos to give it that kind of more emotional weight to what you're doing, rather than pulling it back out so you can see the complete destruction that you're leaving behind. It tried to make the game more personal. And look, obviously, I haven't played it, I can't give a full review of this game, but for everything I've seen of it, everything I know of it, it's trying to put you really in Kratos' shoes to make it a more personable journey and tell that story about Kratos and his son. That's fine, that's not a problem, but it's separate. It's pulled away from what I love about the original trilogy. there's not many creatures from the Norse mythology that are included in it. I know that there's a troll boss or a giant boss or whatever it officially is that's reused over and over again in God of War 4 when they had any number of different creatures they could have chosen from Norse mythology to use. It just pulled itself away too far from what I loved most about the original trilogy. The reason I'm excited for Ragnarok is because I love the story of the Ragnarok. I've read it dozens and dozens of times in my Norse mythology book. I think it's a fascinating story, and even though I know what happens in it, I still think it's fascinating every time I read it. The idea that all of this is preordained, that Jormungandr is destined to be the one that brings down Thor, and all the different implications of who starts it, and the crossing of the Bifrost, and all of these moments that signify this part and this aspect of the Ragnarok. The idea of Kratos being involved in that, being central to that, and possibly changing the events of the Ragnarok. Even though, as far as we know, in every time the Ragnarok has been written down and every way it's been told, this is all preordained, this is destined. Jormungandr is going to kill Thor, but now Kratos is involved. How is his presence going to change that? It's back from just the announcement and the fact it's going to be centered on the Ragnarok. To me, it feels immediately far more intoxicating and far more interesting, because it feels like we're going back to the God of War 3 style of, here are the events, here are the gods. Kratos has been dropped into this mess and is now going to have to help settle it, and is going to change it in a way that mythology never accounted for, That's what I love about the concept of God of War, and that's what I love about the concept of the Ragnarok. It's a story that means a lot to me, and I cannot wait to see how Kratos interacts with it, and whether he has influences over who kills who and who survives, etc. So immediately it piques my interest, and immediately it plays on everything I loved about the original trilogy. So I want to play it, and I desperately hope it is like God of War 3. But to really fully enjoy it, I'm going to need to play God of War 4. So that's the position I'm now in with it. It could be that the Ragnarok game ends up being basically God of War 4 again, and it strips away all everything that I've just said, and it doesn't include as many gods, and it doesn't include as many mythical beasts. But at the end of the day, that's the initial gut feeling I got when I saw it. It was officially going to be titled God of War Ragnarok. Here we are. This is the main event, as it were, of Norse mythology. Kratos is in the middle of it. How is he going to affect things? That in itself is really intoxicating for me as a fan of Norse mythology. So that was a long rambling rant, but I hope that's clarified exactly why this has captured my imagination so much.
It does. I mean, maybe Kratos becomes the wild serpent.
Maybe Kratos becomes Jormungandr. You could be onto something there.
He evolves. It goes like classic Pokemon red and blue graphics, and it just has him evolving into the wild serpent. That's what I want to see in Ragnarok. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I adored the God of War 4, as you said, and when you mentioned it there, it made me realize this. We really both like the wrong ones. I mean, I adore Greek mythology, and I didn't really. Well, I played of the original ones. I didn't particularly the original I didn't particularly enjoy it, which I always state down to the fact is I love them.
Yeah, you didn't want to kill all of those gods because you like them too much. Yeah,
exactly. I was like, why the hell am I trying to kill these people? I love them. I want to be a part of them. Let me kill Kratos. But I thought God of War 4 was just so good, and I think the reason I did thoroughly enjoy it is because it's a very sort of human story, which obviously is used loosely because obviously it's not to do with humans, but it just feels so sweet, and it's a really nice storyline that follows like the father and the son. And I've got opinions of where I think God of War Ragnarok will go, and if it goes the way that I think it will, I think it's got a very nice arc that it could go through, and it really makes stuff that they sort of kind of foreshadowed in 4 really come to play, and it'll just make it really cool game. So I'm really excited to see where they go with the story. I mean, I loved the combat of it. It's kind of got that sort of, it's got a dark, I hate saying this, that it's got like a Dark Souls vibe, because so many games, whenever you play it, no matter what it is, like it's kind of like Dark Souls.
It's the Dark Souls of mythology games.
Exactly. It really does annoy me. But I mean, Dark Souls is an incredible franchise, and it's really changed gaming. But I just hate it when anything comes out and they go, it's kind of like Dark Souls, or this golf game, it's kind of like Dark Souls in the fact that, and so I hate saying it, but it's got that sort of style in the game where, you know, you've got like the sort of like the campfire-esque sort of setups and things, and like the resets, and the style of combat is like, you know, it's been a bit more tricky compared to like the hack and slash of the originals. But yeah, I'm super excited for it. I don't know, it all hinges on the story for me, and if it can keep that sort of cinematic and like stunning, 'cause the way they hid the loading screens, I mean, they're still there and they've just been cleverly hidden, and everything in the game just feels so well crafted and so well put together that they've tried to hide, you know, the loading screens, and they tried to make it feel as cinematic as possible, and they've really tried to emphasize like the story and make it emotional, and they've potentially, you know, obviously I don't know where they're going for the story, but they potentially highlighted where they're going to go with the next set of games and stuff. So I'm super excited. I was a little disappointed that we didn't get something a bit more. You know, people knew Ragnarok was coming. You know, it wasn't a surprise. It was just more of like a, hey, look, it's still coming, guys. It'll be on PS5, like you all assumed it would be. So I was kind of hoping for a bit more. I mean, the logo's not even that different. It's just like a blue version. So yeah, I was hoping for a little bit more, and I wanted to see even something like just a shot of Kratos' head. I mean, I know he speaks, but, you know, just look at him going, oh, look, there he is. Nice. I'm happy I saw that. But no, I'm super excited for it, and I think it's funny. God of War 4 was one of the main reasons, was the final reason that I went ahead and bought my PS4, because I was like, it looks spectacular. I really want to play it, and there's so many other games on PS4 that I want to play. I'm going to get it now so that I can get God of War 4 on launch. And I don't know, maybe God of War 5 will be the same thing that gets me into the PS5. Maybe when that comes out, I'll be like, well, I do need the console now. Like, if I haven't got it by then, I'll be like, I really need it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say this. It feels like one of us is going to be disappointed by God of War Ragnarok, because I'm really hoping it's like God of War 3, and you're really hoping it's going to be like more of God of War 4. So yes. I feel like one of us is going to be very let down.
I'm thinking it's you.
I have a gut feeling it will end up being me. Yes. But at the end of the day, it's one of those games, God of War 4, that I've been meaning to get to for a while. I just kind of feel like I'm going to be let down by it. But if it's going to prepare me for God of War Ragnarok, which I have images of just being a bloody mess of Kratos cutting down all the greatest gods from Norse mythology and killing the world serpent and all the other things that could go on in that environment, then I'm so excited for that concept. If it ends up just being more of God of War 4, I feel like I'm going to be very let down by it. But as a standalone announcement, it was nice to see it finally announced. I didn't expect it necessarily to be Ragnarok immediately. I thought Ragnarok would probably be the end of the quote-unquote trilogy that we were expecting. Obviously, I say quote-unquote because we don't know for definite that it will end up being a trilogy of God of War games like the original were. But I kind of felt like the Ragnarok was going to have to be the final installment in this God of War Norse franchise. So I wasn't necessarily expecting it to be Ragnarok immediately. But the fact that it is, and just all these images I've got in comparison with God of War 3, so excited for the concept of it. But obviously there's a million caveats on that. We don't know what it's going to be like yet. We haven't seen any trailers, we haven't seen any footage, etc. So I'm excited for it, and it's enough to make me go and play God of War 4 when my PS5 arrives and I can get it on that PS Plus collection. But I'm worried. I'm worried already that it's not going to live up to the images I've got in my head. But
I don't think it's going to be like God of War 3. I think there will be a lot more gods to take down. I think they're going to throw a lot more in than they did in the original, but I think that's more of it. But I can't wait for you to actually play God of War 4 and to discuss it, because I've got, as I said, I've got where I think it will go and where I want it to go, and yeah, I really want to discuss it with you to see what you think of that potential route, because I think it could be a real cool concept.
Well, hopefully by the end of November we'll be in a position to discuss it. But yeah, in terms of an announcement on this, I was really excited. It got my imagination going. But yeah, I do kind of feel that it's not going to be the God of War 3-esque hack and slash melee that I'd like it to be. I kind of feel like it's going to end up being more story-driven because that's the precedent they set. But at the end of the day, we have to wait and see. As a standalone announcement, it was fantastic and a really great way to cap off what I thought was a very interesting and very exciting PS5 showcase, even if not everything in there set my heart ablaze looking at you, Call of Duty. So before we finish then, I think you have already made reference to this, but of the games that were announced here in the showcase, your pick, which one were you most excited about coming out of it?
I'm talking about, I think, Demon Souls, just because I just think it looks the most next gen. I think it looks really spectacular, and you know what you're going to get from the game. I mean, it's a remake, and we've played Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro, and so we know the rough format is going to be. But it just looks the most next gen, and Final Fantasy should have. If you told me at the end of it, I'd have been like, Final Fantasy is not my pick. I'd have called you a crazy man. But at the moment, I've just got too many questions and too many ifs and buts about it. Whereas Demon Souls, it looks spectacular.
Yeah, it does look like the embodiment of why you release a new console from what we've seen of it so far. From a personal perspective, for me, it's Hogwarts Legacy. I love the look of that. I'm so totally in love with the concept and the universe of it. And I have a bit more of a secure footing, I feel, than I do with God of War Ragnarok, which I appreciate I sounded quite passionate about there, but only because I have an image of it in my head, which will almost certainly not come to pass. But Hogwarts Legacy, for me, it looked absolutely fantastic. So that is our rundown of the PS5 showcase. As I say, the Xbox Series S, its pre-orders go live tomorrow as of the time of recording. I don't know if we'll be doing a rundown of any of the Xbox exclusives or any of the Xbox launch titles, etc. in the same vein we have here with the PS5 showcase. If we do, obviously keep an eye out on your subscription box. But yeah, I think in the meantime, to tease what's coming next, we are hoping in a couple of weeks' time to sit down and do another podcast to review our picks of the best games from this generation of gaming, which is going to be quite a contentious list because I know what the internet is like with opinions. So we will hopefully be back with you in a couple of weeks' time. We were, a couple of, 5-6 weeks since our last podcast. So hopefully we'll be back a little bit sooner for the next one. But in the meantime, James, thank you very much for joining me again. I'm certainly looking forward to the next one and looking to find out what horrendous opinions you're going to put forward as to your picks for the best games of the generation, because I have a funny feeling you and I are going to disagree on quite a few of them.
No, I think we're going to agree, because all 5 of mine are going to be Crimson Dragon, a wonderful rail shooter that was released at the start of the generation.
Yeah, and I'm going to pick WWE 2K20 just to piss people off. No, of course not. We do have a very broad between us. We have a very broad opinion on which games are quality and which ones are not. So there could end up being some heated debates, as we've already proven with the discussion of God of War 4. But yes, thank you very much for joining me, and thank you to everyone who's listening, of course, today. If you would like to support this podcast in any way, then you can, of course, subscribe to the Polygon Count Podcast YouTube channel, and you can give us a like. You can feel free to drop us a comment and tell us what you liked, what you didn't like. You may decide that you want to comment on the fact that about an hour and a half ago I said we're aiming for an hour, and now it's 1 hour 28. But there you go. We said there was not going to be any strict time limit on this. There was a lot to cover. So, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you in a couple of weeks' time for the next one.